term philosophy and its subsequent practice has its origins rooted in classical Greece. To this present day, all of our major Greek lexicons would suggest that Philosophia, in particular, stems from the compound conjunction of two Greek phrases, Philo, which means love, and Sophia, which means wisdom. The great thinkers Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, and many others of that half millennium before the Common Era all sought some sort of fundamental knowledge regarding the nature of the universe. But what separates philosophy from other scientific disciplines, you may ask? Isn't philosophy just a bunch of obvious observations with little to no real-world applications? I would say my answer is reasonable. It never ceases to fascinate me how closely associated reason is with human activity. However, our society is roughly split evenly between listening to the head or the heart for guidance in decision-making. Regardless of what archetype you identify yourself within the spectrum of psychological types, it is useful, but mostly fun, to understand this particular cognitive faculty because of the degree of relevance it has in our lives. To answer this question, it is essential to have an epistemological framework to further the discussion. From the inception of the human experience, our experiences are dominated by external stimuli that is mostly out of our control. Of course, we can fantasize about our inner realities, but even that is within the scope of our neurophysiological capabilities and henceforth the dreadful AP psychology. Basically, experiential datum is first perceived as isolated in our immediate perception, except that these data are absolutely not isolated. There is a guiding syllogistic force that not only points out one or more patterns between multiple events, but also would permeate outside of the realm of that which can be acknowledged by the five senses. But my teenage past self would then beg the question and suppose that all reality is instantiated upon perception, and that objects do not permeate. Such a belief may seem useless in practice, for the predictive capabilities and explanatory power of unperceived yet logically inferred data leads credence to the very notion of reality beyond the subject's immediate experience. It is outside of the originator, objective as we may say. What am I trying to say? Unless you're René Descartes, don't go mad that everything stepping out of your sight disappears from existence like I did during my existential crisis. Lol. Enough said. Our intuition would have us think that logical consistency correlates to and from empirical adequacy. More specifically, we develop rules from these patterns we perceive, and through that infer even more data. We even develop rules from the patterns in the data which itself is inferred, and infer even more data. Rinse and repeat, and behold, you have culminated in the experience of all humans, and dare I say, all of reality. Granted, the dissenter may pull out his Johari window and take note of reason's fluidity, but I digress. I would say it's reasonable to be modest. Our cultures that are yet to have divorced linguistic entities as objects and subjects would describe it more teleologically, as was in the case of the classical philosophers, where future was synonymous with purpose. Of course, we know now that is simply not the case. There is little evidence that would seem to suggest that there is self-awareness of a meteorite that's about to crash into the ground having fallen from the sky. Hate to break it to you advocates of animism, but everything doesn't have a spirit. So, back to my point earlier. If you feel engaged by the style of the video the past minute or so we went through, even if it means you have difficulty understanding of the terms, sentences, and memorizing schools of thought, which is something I also have to work on, then philosophy is right for you. We as philosophers have an inclination to discuss profound topics, such as existence, knowledge, values, the mind, and language. I would even argue that philosophy is reason in its ultimate form. It's reason about reason. Questions like, what is good? How can we know anything? Who am I? Does God exist? These are all problems philosophers gravitate toward. The best part is that while many of these issues have been explored, philosophy is an open field to study. You don't have to come up with something ground-shattering, but even the slightest contribution to experimental validity in research is useful for philosophical inquiry. As a short testimonial, I experienced a spontaneous aneurysm that blinded my peripheral left. But what struck all the doctors, family, and friends was the fact that I, at the age of 18, was calm and collected, knowing that even if this would be the end of my life, it certainly wasn't a defeat. More specifically, I took heart in my philosophical convictions regarding the loving nature of God, such that although free will and its subsequent choices enable evil to spread throughout this fallen world, we can take part in the rejoicing of the ancient truth that spoke through the blessed Apostle Paul. We know that all things work together for good, for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. Romans 8:28. Granted, philosophy, albeit fundamental, is just one branch of epistemic investigation. But regardless of what worldview you resonate with, nobody can doubt that knowledge is rewarded to those who seek and love wisdom.